Welcome to the Impossible, where we empower others to face the impossible, inspire them to be impossible, and motivate them to do the impossible. I'm Matt, and we are back in the studio with my brother, Austin Douglas. What is it you are so afraid of losing when nothing in this world belongs to you? That is a quote from none other than Marcus Aurelius, and it's a quote that came up recently in our lives, one that we both found to be quite profound, and one that we had never heard before from him. He is a prolific Stoic philosopher, and I know so many of our listeners will know so many of his quotes. We know so many of his quotes. So many of them are so profound and impactful and guiding and insightful in how we can view and approach life over 1,000 years after when they were written. They still hold so much truth. Yet this particular phrase, having been one we'd never heard before, struck both of us. And Austin and I have not really had a chance to discuss this with one another yet. So we decided to have this discussion in real time and capture it for you guys. And immediately, I feel drawn to that statement for multiple reasons. The first is that it really takes a lot of the power away from the fear that we have. Once we realize that our fear, especially the fear that we allow to have control over us, the fear that holds us back from chasing our true passion and purpose in life, once we realize that it's not quite as complex as we build it up to be in our own minds, it becomes so much easier, not necessarily to eradicate it or to eliminate it, but to move forward, even if that must be in the presence of it. Because I don't think it is really worth so much of our time and our effort to try to eradicate fear. But I think our time is much better spent in building our minds and our spirits to grow strong enough to move forward and to execute and to bring out our highest level of potential in the face of that fear, in the face of impossible challenge, as we would call it. And so that's my initial thought, is how do we, again, not eliminate, but how do we grasp this fear? How do we make it into something understandable, something containable, something we can move forward with? And I think this quote does a great job of giving us a step forward in that direction. But what are your thoughts, brother?
My immediate reaction is within the realm of, I think, surface level is the idea of materialism, the idea of that nothing that we purchase, nothing that we consume physically or digitally is ours. None of that's ours. We work hard to go out and own particular things and dance around within the flames of believing that obtainment of said material is somehow putting us on a stool above the rest, or even a mountain to some of the minds that are out there. And it has this sort of internal cry out for humility and humbleness to be bestowed upon the individual who takes that viewpoint of that quote. In terms of the material side, I mean, psychologically, it's much more complex than that. But on the surface level, it immediately makes me think about that, because within my realm of spirituality, I have the sort of pull but also something that is required of me in my examination of how I think that others should be approaching spirituality could be tied within the realm of its humanity, but also it's about the physical, accepting and chasing after the truth within the realm of the physical nature, of the physicality of nature, the tangibleness of nature, and making that approach in terms of how we look upon humanity and how we struggle with things. And that quote there, that was my immediate reaction, was a bit of kind of a lightning strike of, or no, not a lightning strike, but thunder close enough that it shakes you within a little bit about, oh, yeah, I'm driving this vehicle and I purchased it and yada, 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 but like, when I die, somebody else has it, like I own this house, but my biggest hope is to pass it on to the next person, because when I die, I no longer have it. So when I see that, and have had, and you as well, such an intimate relationship to a degree with death at many times of within our lives, we, or at least I, had seen this opportunity to tie that into coming into the world and going out into the world. What do we have within those moments? And it's nothing. So when we come in naked and we leave naked, I mean, it's just there's nothing else that we have other than what's within us.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing material that we can take beyond.
Yeah.
Wherever that beyond is, and I definitely want to stress that this is open for every interpretation of spirituality, is that no material goes with us. We hope to pass it down. That's the best hope that you can have, but you don't leave with it. And so when I hear that quote, that's my immediate reaction is, what are you so afraid of when nothing on this earth belongs to you? It humbles me. It gives me more of a chance to evolve my idea of humility and my approach to humility. But ultimately, it's just a reminder that nothing material in this world will be with you in the end. And thus, you need to start with your immediate reaction to the quote of looking inside to make sure that you're good there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that point, because that was what I was going to add to it as well, is everything we do have, I guess I would say, even beyond this world, but in this existence, everything that we do have actually goes with us. So our mind is ours, our spirit is ours, and to that degree, our emotional strength is ours, and for the time that we're here, our physical state is ours. And that's really all that we have, in the sense that that is all that we can exhibit complete and total control over. Mm-hmm. So if you if you concede to the notion that we have, that we own, that we are our mind and our body and our spirit and our emotions, then you would have to believe that we can exhibit control over them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what so many people miss. I see it so, and I spent a lot of time missing that myself, a very, very, very long time. But we actually have the ability to control our own mind, our own emotions, our own spirit, and through those, obviously, our own body, even our own physiological state to a degree. And the thing is it's not just something that you do or don't do. It's a skill. It's a strength. It's a muscle that has to be flexed and trained and developed and grown and nourished properly. It's not something that happens overnight. In fact, it's one of the very hardest skills to build.
Mm-hmm.
Yet gaining as complete of a control over each of those areas as you can and growing them as effectively as you can will be one of the most valuable pursuits you will ever take in life.
Mm-hmm.
And there's going to be days and there's going to be times, no matter who you are, how good you are in this pursuit, where you fail and you let control slip for a little bit and you allow these domains to run wild, and you may even allow them to control you for a time period. And that's going to happen even to the people who are the very best at this. The important part is that you continue down this path
Mm-hmm.
toward gaining control, and that you keep getting better with it over time. When you do lose control, you regain it in a shorter time frame than you would have previously. You learn to anticipate the moments you might lose control, and you act before it happens. You learn to go one step beyond that, not just control these different domains, but you learn to leverage them into increasing and finding new potential in the challenges you face. This is one thing that I've believed for a very long time, and I've only recently, I think, acknowledged it for what is truly happening. But I believe that we can use our mind to even enhance our own physiologic state. And it sounds wild to say that, but the inverse, the converse, is much more easily believed. So let's just use a powerlifting competition, because that's something a lot of our listeners understand very well. If you go up for your opening set of squats or your opening lift on squats, and anybody who's chasing a high enough number will feel some level of anxiousness or fear. Even if it's very low, because you're a seasoned veteran, if you're chasing a big enough goal, you will have some amount of anxiousness. If you allow yourself to feed into that anxiousness and that nervousness and that worry, and I mean, we've all seen it. If we let ourselves be consumed by the anxiousness and the worry and the fear, we will have a bad lift. Mm-hmm. You're going to be too afraid, and you're going to not go deep enough, or you're going to give up earlier than you should. We've all been in those moments where we've allowed that negative energy to stop us and to hinder us and to limit our ability. Same way as if you go into it with the mindset of, oh, I'm not going to hit this. There's no way I can do this. I don't believe I'm capable of this. If you tell yourself all of that before you chase a max effort lift, there's pretty much no chance you hit it. Mm-hmm. And so to that point, what if we just flipped that around and you built within yourself such an immense belief in your own capacity and your own ability to hit that lift. It's not going to give you 100% guarantee, but your chances will be significantly higher than than the other way around. Mm-hmm. If you told yourself you couldn't in no way hit that lift. And I believe you can take that even one step further. And that's really the state that I believe is the being impossible. It's putting yourself in such, at least for me, what it feels like is such an emotionally and spiritually raw and open and malleable state that I build such a conviction in my mind that it overflows and pours out into my body. And it's like my body overrides its own physical limitations. It's similar to how, like, a governor on a car will not let the engine or it won't let the car go above a certain speed. Mm-hmm. It at a certain speed, it restrains the engine from going any harder to make the car go faster. I know it's probably a pretty limited description of it, but it's essentially the concept. Well, what if, but we have the power to take that governor off a car.
Right.
Or delete the computer code that may enforce it. In which case, we can then push the car far beyond the limit that has been placed on it. I believe the same concept in our mind. We all have governors in our own mind that limit us and keep us in quote-unquote safe zones. Because our mind, and to a point some of our intuition and some of our spirit, is by default programmed to keep us safe. And that's whatever you believe, that's a evolutionary driven concept.
Yeah,
to keep us alive long enough, to pass on our genetic code and whatever else, may be the end evolutionary goal. We have the survival instinct to stay safe. And so the mind has built up over time a governor that keeps us limited in order to keep us safe. But we have power over that governor. Mm-hmm. And it is a skill that you have to develop just like anything else. Learning to override that a bit. Learning that your true potential lies beyond that. Now, you still have to balance safety with this. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily recommend that you push it to 110% every single time, in every single lift, in every single moment, verging on the edge of collapse every single time you get under a bar or in any other situation in life. And for myself, I don't even use that impossible state every training session, definitely not every lift. And rather it may be once or twice a month, if that even. It hits in times where I'm facing something that comes with a particular added challenge, usually from a physical sense for me, because of how much challenge I face with my body post chemotherapy and post ECMO and post everything else it's been through. And it comes in times when I have to perform at a certain level, and especially when I have no reason to be able to that day. And it is a skill I have to practice from time to time, but it's not a skill I can use every single time. But I've felt it and experienced it enough times now that I know how to quickly flip that switch, and I know when I can and when I should go into that state. And every single time it blows me away. I just had to do it again yesterday for yesterday's squat session. And yesterday was a very interesting day for me because I have recently, I had another battle, a very heavy battle with anemia and massively decreased oxygen supply as a result. which is not a good combination for max effort lifting.
Nope.
But we still pushed through from a training perspective, still kept on the path, and I finally got my iron infusion, which allowed my hemoglobin to be made and started boosting up my readily available oxygen for the muscle tissue and all the other cells in my body. And so now this week training has been starting to get a lot back more on course of where I know it should be. And so I felt really good going into the training session yesterday. And then for whatever reason, because I have some heart rate dysregulation issues as well, some electrical issues with my heart, it started acting up really bad the second I start squatting. And my heart rate's in like the 160s between lifts, just like chilling out there. And I can't get it to come back down. I can't get it to cool off. And I keep going through my lifts, and I had already had to modify my numbers from where I had hoped I might be able to go based on how I felt going into the session. But from about my very first working set, the weight felt very heavy on me. And yesterday I was in there at a particularly weird time where I had no spotters or loaders, nobody to run the monolift. So I'm walking out this weight, which is very difficult, especially with chains to do on the prosthetic leg. And not only that, but like to try to situate my leg and move my prosthetic foot to exactly where I
saw
wanted.
the struggle there with the right foot.
Yeah, I could never get my foot exactly where I wanted it to get the exact form that I wanted. So all that combined, I was facing a tremendous amount of fear in yesterday's session. And it just comes from a primal place of not just this is a dangerous situation, but this is a compromising situation.
Mm-hmm.
And to tie that back to the original quote, we opened with, what are you so afraid of losing when nothing in this world is truly yours? And so it's interesting to sit and think and analyze, well, what was I so afraid of? Because I don't feel a great deal of fear of death. You and I have discussed that at length, and it's something we've been far too intimate in the past with to really fear to the degree that a lot of other people might. So it wasn't that. And it wasn't necessarily a fear of the weight itself.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe it was a fear of my own potential weakness. It was a fear of my own potential choice to give up or to give into the situation. It was a fear of maybe even receiving an injury that could weaken me physically.
Mm-hmm.
It was a fear of giving in to weakness in some shape or form. And so if that's the fear, then the antidote to it is to show strength in the face of it, and to overcome it, and to work through it, move with it into a better state. And so I do my first working set, I hit it, but I struggle. I take a break, rest, recover, recoup. Hit my second working set and just barely make it through the second rep. I'm doing doubles up to a certain RPE level. So I'm kind of choosing the weights myself in this session. And that second set that I did it matched the heaviest weight I've done. It was 319 plus 120 in chains. So 440 at the top on squats for a double and box squats. It's the heaviest weight I've been under this whole entire training cycle. Or it matches the heaviest weight I've been under. And that, in that moment, that felt like my maximum potential. Like I said, I barely got through that second rep.
Mm-hmm.
And so the mind's natural instinctual reaction is call it there, or stay the same weight, or cut back weight even. But I knew I had more capacity. I knew that right in that moment, it wasn't my physical body that was the limiting factor. It was my own, it was the fear I was feeling within my spirit. And so I actually added 10 pounds on and chose to get back under the bar. The biggest difference is I put myself in that enhanced mental and subsequently physiologic state. And I know I've done it enough times now. I know my exact triggers. I know the path to get there. And I'm really getting to where I can do it rather quickly. And it never ceases to amaze me every single time how on that second set, I pick the weight up and it feels so crushingly heavy. Mm-hmm. And then I add 10 pounds, but with a significantly enhanced mental and physiologic state. And I pick the weight up, even though it's heavier, it feels so much infinitely lighter. It feels like something I could do all day long. And that's always so fascinating to me. And so I go through that. I make sure to give careful attention to the walkout and the setup and every aspect of the lift itself. And the first rep of that last double ended up being my best rep of the entire training session. But then a really interesting thing happened yesterday. After that first rep, I let that fear slip back in a little too much. Mm-hmm. And so it speaks to how delicate of a state this can be. I let that fear slip in just a little too much. And my second rep moved fine and definitely better than it had the previous set. But it was a little shakier. It wasn't as controlled. I let myself fall down to the box a little too quickly, and I came up a little slower than I would have liked. And so, I could say, well, I still got through it. I still made both reps, and I'm happy that I did. But even in that moment, I knew I let it slip back in a little too much. And so all that to say, as crazy as it sounds, we can use our minds and our spirits to leverage enhanced physiologic states. And bring out from within us a higher level of potential than we would have ever dreamed could have existed. And usually the number one thing holding us back from reaching that is fear. And to circle back to the original quote, what is it we are so afraid of? And I think Marcus Aurelius brings up a really good point, because there's nothing in this physical world I was afraid of losing in that moment. What I was afraid of losing was actually what was really mine, which was my own personal strength in all four of those domains. And what's fascinating to me about that situation yesterday is that the only way for me to maintain that strength and to build it, the only way to actually not lose it, was to fight through that fear, to do what I was there to do, to hit those extra reps, to not give in to the fear, to bring forth the strength to move with it and to move through it and come out the other side stronger.
And there's a lot to take from that internal fight that you must partake in. You have to be willing to go to battle against a lot of demons, a lot of insecurities, not only just fear. There's a lot that you're facing there. And I think past traumas, insecurities, giving them the kind of umbrella term of just inner demons, I suppose. I think that's something that when we fall into moments of fear, of being afraid, what is it that you were afraid of when nothing in this world truly belongs to you? I think I see it as a loss of focus to kind of attach to, when you're talking about the governor that we have internally of fight or flight, of survival, of reproduction. I mean, all of these primal, innate instincts, what's built into our genetic code. It's going to take a very long time it's going to take a very long time for the society that we live in to really take its effect on but evolving those feelings and those reactions and those innate goals to a way that would make a bit more, I would say, sense within today's society. Because us sitting here in the United States and in the positions that you and I are in, there are a lot of things that we don't necessarily have to worry about, that our ancestors and the ones that we evolved from had to worry about, and what a lot of people even today still have to worry about. And so it's I feel that it's a loss of focus on our part when we don't have what we've been coded to be afraid of. No longer is it within the realm of, natural predators, not of, if we don't get anything on the hunt today, we might be not eating tonight. Those kinds of changes within the realm that we live in today, which are changes that have only come really since the beginning of industrialization, and even during the first half a century to a century of that, still a lot of people have to be concerned about that. So people within our positions, I feel that if you start to allow those fears to surface, it is because you have lost focus. They can, the stints of depression, the claws of anxiety, and the malintent of ultimately what fear can dawn upon you can be extremely, it has a potential to cloud your judgment so heavily that you become lost. You are engulfed within the kind of the ether of fear and possibly loathing, possibly this existentialist, or in a state of existentialism, that things are not making sense, and it can continue to tumble down into something that is extremely ugly, that is something that is extremely intolerable for those around you, but within yourself you begin to tolerate it, because you feel that you are stuck in this ether. It's that tar pit that I've sort of referenced in previous talks, and within our book itself. I definitely, I have personally experienced that pit of tar, that seemingly immovable state towards anything positive at all. And again, a quote like that to circle back to my initial, findings of what internally we can do is it's a check mark of humbleness, because it stops you for a moment and helps you regain some your perspective on reality itself, on your reality. It allows you to focus a little bit, I think, or not even a little bit. To which degree it allows you to focus is obviously going to be extremely dependent upon you and your situation. But I think if you're willing to open up yourself to the reality of your situation, quotes like that are going to offer you it's not just a band-aid, for me at least. This quote has enough power that if you can sit yourself down, and the quote itself shouldn't be forcing you to sit yourself down to analyze what's going on within your life, but the quote just simply gives you the possibility of having a different perspective on your approach to analyzing what's going on within your life, to maybe give you an aha moment to fix this, or to fix that, to find this, to refocus on that. I think, and that's why I feel that the quote can be so powerful, is if you're willing to dig deeper, you may find a little bit more gold. And I find myself extremely motivated, maybe, for when I hear that. It stops even myself, who, or to where I find myself in very much I find myself on a path these past few months, past 6 months, but the past few especially, that has been so overwhelmingly positive. And to a small degree, I really don't want to slow down any of that sort of momentum within the realm of trying to overanalyze and to think, oh well, do I deserve this? Should I be able to handle this? Can I handle this? Why me? No. I don't want to slow down the momentum within that smaller degree. But for the larger degree, it's lovely to hear that quote, because even in times of greatness, of which I'm finding myself on the journey of reaching goals, finding potentials. I'm not saying I'm this epitome of greatness. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying what I found on this pathway has been absolutely wonderful, and I am not shameful, and I have no regrets on what I have found during this time, whether it be super positive or the occasional super negative thing. You're gonna find that stuff. I mean, in the times that you're digging deep within your soul, there's going to be some really ugly parts. And you have to be willing to accept that. And when you collect yourself, when you refocus with a quote like that, I believe that you can fight off those inner demons. You can remove yourself from that ether of fear, and ultimately find yourself on a path that is at least worthy of living for. Because we here in our situations in Ohio right now have it pretty okay compared to a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree. And You know what that particular point you bring up makes me just realize, and I hadn't considered this before. You bring up that idea of focus. And it makes me wonder if this quote isn't so much a quote as much as it is how it's actually grammatically phrased, as much as it is a true, earnest question.
Mm-hmm.
You and I talked a little bit before we started recording about how so much of Marcus Aurelius' work, including all of Meditations, was never meant to be read by anyone else. It was his own collections of thoughts and journals and questioning. And I can't help but wonder if he was not necessarily implying, as so many, and as I did initially, when you first read that quote, what are you so afraid of when nothing in the world belongs to you? You think, oh, that means since nothing in this world belongs to me, I can't really lose anything. Therefore, I shouldn't be afraid of anything. That's kind of the natural path the mind goes down. Or at least that I shouldn't let the fear of losing something control me. What if he's legitimately asking a question? You know, and I can imagine him sitting in his chambers or wherever he was at the time. You know, he may be commanding legions or whatever he may be doing. Maybe he's in the grips of massive fear. And he's trying to figure out, what is it I'm so afraid of? He's demanding that question of himself. And now demanding that question of us. Because like you say, so much of the time we need to bring ourselves into a more focused state. And that focus can be directed toward many different missions or passions or purposes that one might have for themselves. But when you're in the grips of fear or anxiety or depression or PTSD or so many of these emotional states or these mental states that we can battle, sometimes one of the biggest steps forward is putting a name to the adversary. Figuring out, who is it I'm fighting against? What is it I'm afraid of? And just like in the moment last night during my squat session, when I'm in the grips of this massive fear, and then I realize that the fear I have is not of potentially dying. It's not of missing the lift. It's not even necessarily risking injury. The fear that I have is of my own potential for weakness. And once I realized that that was the fear I was battling, the path forward became clear, that the only option out of that and through that is to choose strength and to bring forth an enhanced mental, spiritual, and physical state that allowed me to move with that fear, to move through that fear, and put everything I have into that lift, even if I don't complete it. If I put everything I have into it and move through that fear with every ounce of strength I can harbor in every domain, then there is no weakness in that. Because as we discussed in the beginning, we can't completely eradicate fear from our lives. Nor do I think should we try to. Because a big part of the human experience and the human spirit is the balance and the ebb and flow and the experience of both positive and negative emotion. And each of those can be used toward different ends, as long as we allow ourselves and build enough strength to maintain as much control over those states as we possibly can. There's been times in my life where I've used very negative emotional states to fuel very positive actions, especially very early on in my lifting career. There's a lot of lifters who get very angry and very fired up and even like sad or vengeful, or all of these states we would typically tie negativity toward. People have found useful ways to channel those into positive forward action and into building strength. So I don't think it should ever be a goal of ours to eradicate what we would label as negative emotion or negative states. But rather, it's a much more useful venture and a much higher pursuit of strength to take all of those states, the negative and the positive, learn to build as much control over them as we can, and channel them to as much forward positive growth as humanly possible. Because there are things that I am deeply afraid of. Not many things in the physical sense, but just like last night, the state of fear in realizing my own potential for weakness. Because that potential exists just as my own potential for strength exists. And it's my life's mission to choose the path of strength as many times as I can in the time that I have here. But at any moment, it's open for me, and as it's open for any of us, to choose a path of weakness. And that is a deep fear I have. But it's something of mine. My own strength of spirit, of mind, of body. That's something that's actually mine, that will be gone when I'm no longer here. Mm-hmm. Now, certainly, hopefully, we can instill that same state into others and lead others toward that same state. But it's not our state spilling over into them. It's them building up that own state within themselves. So my own personal state of strength will be gone when I'm no longer here. Mm-hmm. Even if it's still being used to help, and I hope that it will be used to motivate and inspire and drive other individuals toward the same in their own lives. But that's something I deeply fear. And I think similarly, probably the other greatest fear, and an even greater fear that I have, and this is one that would maybe take some more time to unpack, but it is of anything harmful happening to my daughter Lily. And that is something that is deeply, deeply primal, and something that actually will, time to time, override even my own conscious state. Like if we're walking around upstairs and I see her crawling into the kitchen and I can't recall that I visually confirmed that the door of the basement steps is closed, I will pretty much sprint into the laundry room to confirm that door is closed. And it's not a conscious choice. It's not a decision. It is 100%. I don't know where the drive comes from. It's something deeply primal, something deeply instinctual. And it is motivated by a large amount of fear of what could happen otherwise. but it is not something I choose. It is something that happens to protect her. And so that's really where the motivation comes from there is protection. And so that's kind of a different part of the conversation, I would say. But that is another massive state of fear that I feel on, especially now that she's a toddler, an increasingly regular basis. But even then, I think it's not even so much a fear of something like physically happening to her as much as it is a fear of, because that's the greatest love I've ever known is for her, and it's the greatest love I will ever know. And to love someone more than you love yourself, even, I think in a way that feels even more as if that is a part of ourselves. In the same way that my physical strength and my mental strength is a part of me. She is actually literally part of me. Like half of her expressed genetic code is from me. And so I think that fear must surface from that same level of like fear of losing what is actually yours, what is actually part of you, both internally and I suppose in this case externally. So I don't think it should be such a venture of ours to eliminate fear from our lives, but rather learn to leverage it, learn to use it, learn to fight against it as a means to build higher levels of strength, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And most especially, use those states of intense fear to bring forth a higher potential, to put yourself into that impossible state of existence where you bring forth a level of strength and performance that should not be possible given the circumstance. And we can do that by continually choosing to chase our highest level of strength in all of these domains.
And that's what's so beautiful about taking on those challenges and facing fear. And the other beautiful thing that I take away from it is, again, you have the choice to fight it. You have the opportunity to take advantage of a weaker form of you. It's accepting fear is you becoming a weaker human being. Just the meat and potatoes of what we're trying to say here. Or at least what I'm trying to say here. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
And it's not so much accepting it as much as it is allowing it to exhibit control over you. Because you can accept that fear exists. You can accept that you have fear, that you feel fear.
Mm-hmm.
And you can still choose to move forward in the correct path, in the highest level of strength, given its existence.
Yes.
But it's when you choose to allow it to control you. Similarly, like last night, if I had chosen to not go after that final set of squats, if I had chosen that to allow that fear to overcome me and control my actions and keep me from realizing a potential that I knew could exist, that would have been choosing the path of weakness.
And trying to come up with a word. The bowing down to it.
Surrender.
The surrendering to fear. And that's something that you don't need to be concerning yourself with. I have found that in every opportunity to challenge it and to not to eradicate but to overcome it.
Absolutely.
Is an opportunity worth taking. And I don't always win. You don't always win.
Yeah.
Nobody ever always wins. But try.
Yeah.
You have the choice. You have the opportunity. Take advantage of it. Stop, wallowing in your pity. Fight. Why are you so afraid when nothing in this world belongs to you? Stop being afraid. Just stop. It is an insult against your existence in the first place. It is an insult against those who don't have those opportunities to fight for what they want to fight for. So go do it. Excuses are not needed in this moment. Thank you very much. Go after it. Chase your goals. Do what you want to do. Face that fear. And I can at least promise you that life will get better. How substantially better? Dependent upon your effort. I have found that in the past 3 months, I've put a substantially larger amount of fight towards my fears. And my life is substantially better. And I'm not believing in coincidence there. 1 + 1, it equals 2. And that has made my life worth living, and I look forward to waking up every single day and doing it all over again. And I'm not only looking forward to the next day. I am so very thankful that I have the opportunity to wake up the next day, because obviously that's gonna be a limited number. That number's not infinite. So don't pretend like it is.
Yeah, and it's this, I think, where we have to all come back to, and where we have to start with this step one, is realizing and allowing yourself to truly believe that we can have active control over our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
We are not slaves to our emotions.
Nope.
Now, certainly you can build yourself into that state. I've built myself into that state before. So in my darkest times of my life, I was a slave to my own emotions, running from my own fear, trying to escape it any way I could.
Yeah.
And that brought me nothing but complete misery and personal harm.
And addiction.
Yeah, exactly. And it wasn't until I realized and started to understand that I actually had the power to gain influence and eventually gain control over these states, over these emotions, both, again, what we would call positive and negative, and that I could channel them into worthwhile ventures, that I started to get on a better path.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's something just like any physical skill or capability. Some people are going to be more naturally gifted in that venture than others. Some may have a much, much harder road toward attaining control over your emotional state.
But you have to try.
But just like
have to try.
any physical venture as well, we can all grow better at it.
Don't stop.
No matter how hard inherently it may be for you, you can grow stronger, you can get better, you can build a higher skill set in that area. And it's one that will bring massive compounded interest no matter where your starting point is. And when you choose to pursue that on a daily and momental basis, and you make as many choices as possible to choose strength and to move forward in the face of fear, in the face of struggle, in the face of potential weakness, in the face of the impossible, the greater the opportunity will be to bring forth a potential you would have never dreamed could exist. And so for me, that is what that quote, that question, is a reminder of. It's a reminder of my true pursuit in life. A pursuit of the impossible.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. Anything else to add tonight, brother?
We're good.
All right. Guys, that was our unpacking of this idea, this question, this quote by the prolific Marcus Aurelius. Austin and I sit and have discussions about these all the time. And in fact, it's one of the biggest reasons we started this podcast was we used to have these conversations so regularly. We thought, well, hey, maybe one of these conversations will help somebody.
Yeah.
So we should record it and give it to people. Because if you have that potential, then you need to bring it forth. And so that's our biggest hope, that our message and our chats and our discussions and all of the incredible guests we're honored to bring on this show will help grow and drive and motivate and build you guys in your own pursuits and your own passions for life. And we are also interested to hear what you guys think of this. To think of the quote itself, or even what you think of our discussion of it. We always love hearing input. So if you have additional comments or additional questions, leave those below, because we love reading those from you guys, and we do respond to each and every one of those ourselves. And if you want further discussion, we'd love to chat with you. Reach out to us. I am at Impossible Performance on Instagram and TikTok. That's impossible.performance. And Austin, brother, where can people find you?
Austin_strength.
Those will both be linked in the show notes if you guys need to get to those. And beyond all of that, we're very excited for the direction we're moving in. We're going to be making some big upgrades to our production quality here in the near future, which is just incredibly exciting to see where we've come from.
Yeah.
Starting 2 years ago now to what we've built, achieving over 100 episodes at this point, and seeing the next phase of where we're going, We've got some very exciting new brand deals in place, which we'll be sharing with you guys officially soon, as soon as we get all the contracts and everything aligned. But stay tuned for that news, but most especially, help us spread the word of this podcast. That's all we can ever ask for you guys. And that's the core purpose of why we're here doing what we're doing. If there's anybody you know who you think this message or this mission or this mindset would help, please share this episode with them. Because at Impossible Performance, we are striving to build a global culture of strength, fostering a spirit of growth in constant pursuit of the impossible. Thank you for listening, and as always, be impossible.